Soapman says you must be at least this tall to read the judge commentary. Fortunately, we just qualify. Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to MagMammal 3, and it's time for the judge commentary on the last couple of stages we just played through, starting with 150th place, Revenge of Tricastle by Nintega94. This stage got a 3.8 in difficulty, 10.2 in design, 5.6 in fun, 7 in creativity, 7.4 in aesthetics, and 7 in functionality. Mick. Well, slow-loading rainstorms and super epic music make for an unusual first impression. A smidge broken, though. I'd advise less rain in the future. As for the level, I'll grant the many varieties of Tricastle is an interesting concept, and some of them, like Toadman's Castle or the Ride Over the Abyss, can be interesting ideas, albeit very awkward. It's a lucky thing that Tricastle struggles to kaizo you. I mean, that's easy. Just pick a costume that obscures your hitbox. Worked for me. Unfortunately, the majority of unique ones are placed badly. Most of them lose their cannon fire to a roof, which makes them complete non-entities, and others, namely Twin Tricastle, are a bit of a mess to fight. Combine that with the rest of the level doing nothing memorable, plus a very dull visual aesthetic, and this largely misses the mark. That being said, there's one sticking point I have to discuss that goes beyond being just boring. The ladder castle was especially poorly executed. The fight has a ton of desync issues, which can make it difficult just to hit the thing. And if the ladder castle hits you, you're dead and you have to redo that entire super long ladder climb just to get another shot. It's excruciating, simply put, and I strongly advise anyone fighting this castle to break out Spark Chaser or Tornado Blow. It is unfortunately the most memorable part of the level, and combined with the other issues already present, it's a huge blemish on something that could have been interesting. Shinryu. I don't think I've seen a level that goes from meh to frustrating like this in quite some time. Everything starts off pretty basic, with the only major sticking point being a somewhat tricky jump required to get the token, and not fall into the pit afterwards. Yeah, pretty sure I failed that one. So far it's nothing really worth writing home about, and then the platform riding section, and most of what follows, happens. Using the Tricastle's platforms as more than just a method for hitting the mini-boss is a neat idea. However, the execution here leaves so much to be desired. It's basically one straight shot peppered with a few enemies that are guaranteed to knock you into the pit unless you keep shooting, while also staying to the left of the platform to avoid the hoo-hoos rocks from above. And don't forget the blast radius of Killer Bullet, I'm pretty sure that got me at least once. Immediately afterwards, we come to a long ladder section with Yoku spikes. While I'm thankful for their indication via the Yoku blocks on the side, it doesn't make this part any less tedious. And then we have the Tricastle fight at the top. So, yeah, behind the scenes as far as my recording process. During a session, first I record my blind run of the stage or stages that I play for a video. Only after that do I read the comments, and before I actually record the commentary, I do sort of a preview of everybody's commentary just to see what everyone says, to have a better idea of the flow and at least try to cut down on tripping over my words. Sometimes it doesn't work. English can be hard sometimes, says the Durgan. So, when I read this thing about the Yoku blocks being an indicator, I went back and looked at my footage. And yes, as you know by now, I facepalmed hard. I did not notice that they were indeed an indicator. When a Yoku block appears, that shows where, right after it disappears, a spike is going to appear on the ladder. So, it is actually showing what's going on. However, in all the chaos, I did not pick up on that. We'll hear more about this later from the other judges, actually, but yes, I can at least, after being told, I can see what the pattern was, so there is something there. It's this part right here that pushes the level overboard into becoming frustrating. The Yoku spikes strung throughout the limited space you have to work with is bad enough, but if you get hit by the Tricastle's exploding shots and happen to fall down the ladder, you die and have to redo the entire ladder climb all over again. Granted, you can sort of cheese this with a combination of Magnetic Shockwave and Spark Chaser. It still doesn't change the fact that this part is overly punishing, and quickly turns tedious thanks to the checkpoint placement. And after that, the stage just kind of fizzles out. Past that high point of frustration, the rest of the level doesn't really have any major noteworthy parts to it, since the rest of the Tricastles don't add much to the segments they're placed in. They don't even do that much for the boss fight. And while I can at least appreciate the gesture of wanting to spice up Vanilla Toadman's fight with gimmicks to make it a bit harder, at the end of the day, that's a really tall task to pull off successfully, even for a seasoned level designer. Patchy. Tricastles, and they're out, for vengeance! A level where it's just about fighting a somewhat versatile mini-boss with varying setups each time is not a bad idea, but I can't say that a majority of these fights were very well thought out. The biggest offender, that one where you have to fight on the ladder, is why. So the hole you came from becomes an instant death pit due to the room being treated as a boss fight, so you die if you get hit by any of its projectiles and knocked off. And if that's not enough, there are also Yoku spikes placed precisely where you have to shoot the other two eyes from. If you fail this encounter, you have to do the long climb of waiting for Yoku spikes to get out of the way each and every single time. That gets tedious fast. There's also that awful section where you need to ride on the Tricastle platform across many screens, where the small platform size pretty much means, you guessed it, instant death from any damage source knocking you over. At least that one is over quick if you know where all the hazards are coming in. The boss fight is okay, I guess. It's not offensive or anything, just Toadman with a little more going on. Flashman 85. A series of increasingly involved Tricastle battles is a fun premise. I especially like double Tricastle and teaming up with Toadman. But because the non-Tricastle sections are all over the place in terms of length, difficulty, and focus, it doesn't feel like everything is working together to make Tricastle the star of the show. Especially Proto-Man, funny though he may be. The bombastic music makes that even more apparent. Metals guarding a ledge are hardly epic. The visuals are functional, but monotonous. I would have liked a progression from bright clear sky to dark ominous thunderclouds, as well as a more distinctive tile set to give the level a better sense of place. Rain appearing on top of the health bar is indicative of the myriad minor polish shortcomings. I didn't notice, actually, if that's in the footage or not, if that was something that was still going on or if the devs fixed that. Riding a Tricastle platform to some other destination would be brilliant if it were A, clear that's what you're supposed to do, B, impossible to strand yourself by destroying Tricastle with special weapons, and C, a more interesting payoff than standing around doing nothing for 25% of the total screen count. I'm sorry, but the latter segment has to be one of the most poorly executed challenges in this contest. It's a clever puzzle that's easily mistaken for a haphazard and rude non-puzzle, and it starts with a slog through Susie's that makes me more impatient and less attentive to detail with every retry. Failed to notice the subtle pattern with the Yoku blocks, which I did for years until watching someone else play the level, and you'll spend a miserable eternity memorizing the timing and placement of seemingly untelegraphed instant death across multiple identical screens with no distinguishing features whatsoever, and then die immediately on the mini-boss, who at the very least needs a boss gate at the entrance for safety's sake. Yeah, I think that's kind of how things hit me. I was getting kind of impatient with having to do that repeatedly. The difference in my hitbox, that part's my own fault, though who knew that's what I was going to be facing with that particular costume. But yeah, I did not see the pattern when I was playing, and so I did think it was just something I had to memorize, which, to be fair, I eventually did, but yeah, I failed to see the actual puzzle there. It's a shame that these issues are so prominent, because I can see a mini-boss-centric level being really successful. The creativity is there, and honestly the challenge design is partially there, but much more planning and playtesting needed to happen. A-Spark. I'm going to keep this fairly short. Most of the stage is mediocre. It's all very dull, rather ugly, and for the most part, it just exists. Now to be fair, that segment which is inspired by the Super Mario Bros. 2 Birdo ride, that was actually rather neat. I don't know how it gelled together, given the enemy mix, but it was a fair and reasonable challenge. Unfortunately, Tricastle gets old rather fast. Word to the wise, Magnetic Shockwave one-shots this thing. You're welcome. That said, oh man, wow do I despise the Yoku ladder segment, but I'll give you props, it's actually a cool idea. But it's very hard to parse just what the heck is going on. I think using Yoku spikes instead of blocks would have helped this, but it goes on for too long, and this soon becomes an utter nightmare thanks to one thing, Tricastle. They certainly get their titular revenge here. Outside of hiding right at the bottom of the screen, if the lower doors make their move immediately, you're dead. It's very little room to survive, and pretty much guaranteed to kill the player the first few times, and then you go climbing again. Fun! Honestly, the Yoku spikes here are even harder to parse than the latter. You changed up the tell. Why'd you go and do that? Hoo boy, the rest of the stage goes back to dull Metool stuff again. It exists. The Toadman fight also exists. It's just too stupid to try and fight him and Tricastle at the same time. So, with a good old Magnetic Shockwave in tow, it becomes just another Toadman fight. Surprising just how much goodwill 3 or so screens can lose a stage, huh? So, one thing I do agree with that A-Spark said there is I do think the puzzle actually would have been a bit clearer if the indicator were spikes appearing to the side of the ladder instead of a block. Because the block made it feel like is there something I'm supposed to do with these? Is it supposed to be like some sort of weird range indicator or something? Because I was looking at, am I safe as long as I'm between these two blocks or some weird thing like that? I was trying to parse something like that. But I feel like if it was a spike that was just kind of moving to the side with each Yoku shift and getting onto the ladder that way, that, I think, would have been a clearer tell. Overall, though, I think this stage is kind of the position where the idea is there. It's a solid idea. The creativity is there, like Flashman said. It's just a stage that honestly needed a bit more polish. But overall, pretty serviceable. Pretty decent stage, I would say. So now, 149th place, Discharge by writer BD. This stage got a 4.2 in difficulty, 15.4 in design, 8.4 in fun, 7.6 in creativity, 11 in aesthetics, and 7.4 in functionality, with a 25% time penalty. Mick. I know electric stages have a reputation for difficulty, but this one goes too far. Discharge Man's stage has 4 interests: instant death, tight jumps of death, surprise attacks that can make death, and conveyor belts leading to death. Today's secret word is death. Whenever anybody says it, scream real loud. The challenges are doable, but they're all high punishment paired with sparse checkpoints, meaning a lot of retries. It also means there's not a lot of variety, so the whole level blends together. That's not to say the level is thoughtless, as it definitely tries to do interesting things with what it's got, such as a slide tunnel of dodging elect beams or having 2 different varieties of electric gabules. But when nearly every section kills you on failure, the majority ceases to be memorable. The only exception is when the level goes for cheap tactics. The Elecans are one thing, as they needed better telegraphs, or really just telegraphs at all. Yeah, in Sparkman's stage, the Elecans, they're the big plug enemies. They had, like, entry chutes that they dropped down through. You don't have that here, so they just appear out of the middle of nowhere. There's also an invisible spike or two, which I really hope is an accident. Okay, don't think I ran afoul of that. But the real issue is the power-up traps. Ye goodness. The lone one-up met serves no other purpose than to waste your time with a risk. And that Yashichi. Sending you back to the beginning of the stage for sliding a pinch too far is cruel and unusual. Thankfully, there's a shortcut partway through, which I also figure is unintentional, and the tanks in the stage don't have any nasty traps attached. However, it doesn't do enough to alleviate the frustration from everything else. I do have to wonder if the shortcut, if that was intended as a, yeah, I got you with the Yasichi trap, but here, you can get back there faster, or if it was just like a dev exit sort of thing so he could test the boss, and he just forgot to close it, or what. But I mean, I found it easily enough, but then fell for the Yasichi trap, and just decided to go the other way and show the rest of the stage, so yeah. After all that, is Discharge Man an improvement? Somewhat. I love the establishing shot of his boss gate, and I'm so glad the level delivered on the boss fight it promised. It's a pity that the boss himself is a mixed bag. The main problem is typical shield issues. Discharge Man spends too much time behind that barrier for how much damage he does. Combined with his speed, the end result is about as frustrating as the main level. But then you discover that every weapon except Thunder Beam and the Buster ignores his shield? Wait, what? Oh dear! Rendering him a non-issue. On one hand, the surprise breather is nice. On the other hand, it really feels like he's just punishing Buster usage, not rewarding intuitive weapon usage. Still, he's better off than his level. A little rebalancing and I think he'll be fine. Shinryu. Let's get the good out of the way first. The aesthetics here are pretty decent. It's nothing visually outstanding or unique, but for the most part, everything looks and sounds alright. Unfortunately, that's where most of my praise for this level ends. The actual design of this stage is very rough. Once you get past the first hallway, a lot of the remaining rooms feel too cramped and cluttered for their own good. The tighter sections wouldn't be that bad if not for the fact that nearly every platforming challenge is surrounded by spikes and pits. The frustration factor is very high here, partly due to the lack of checkpoints, but more so thanks to the sheer amount of gotcha traps. The Elecans are among the worst offenders, since they pop out of thin air and tend to appear while you're in mid-jump. Yeah, that is true. Another one comes in the form of a fake 1-up, which is placed in such a way that you're guaranteed to take a hit if you go for it. The spikes surrounding it would also be a problem if the 2 spikes to the right of it actually had any collision. That, along with a set of invisible spikes at the end of a hallway later on, is where the functionality took a hit. Okay, so there's some spikes that appear but aren't really spikes, and some that are really spikes but you don't see them. Okay, that's a problem. However, the worst moment of the stage has to be that one involving the Asichi at the end. If you slide through the gap to collect it, you'll end up transitioning to a much earlier screen in the stage. While you can use the retry button to completely bypass this, it's still no excuse for this part being the way it is. Beyond that bit of frustration, not much else of this stage actually stood out to me in the end. Since the level doesn't evolve beyond slightly different variants of dodge react to this or get pushed into instant death, most of it comes across as pretty samey and boring after a while. I can only really point to a few moments that do anything remotely different, mainly the ones that involve timed jumps to hit Sniper Joes between electric surges. The last and probably the most notable part of this level would be the boss. While he has a cool design, I can't say I was a fan of the actual fight. High damage output combined with little to no telegraphs on his moves makes for a very annoying battle. What also doesn't help is that he seems to keep his shield up for an arbitrary amount of time, making Buster-only duels way more trouble than it's worth. Granted, every other weapon also pierces his shield, except Thunderbeam, but at that point it starts to feel less like exploiting a boss's weakness, and more like overcompensation for how annoying his shield can be. Honestly, if his telegraphs were more fair, and his shield had more consistent uptime, I could see this being a decently fun fight. Instead, it ends up being almost as frustrating as the rest of the level. Patchy. Danger. Electrifying hazards. First thing foremost, really rude enemy placements here. Those plug guys especially that are invisible until you get close, they're always placed in spots where you easily get knocked into death. Not great. It gets quite nasty near the end as well, with the tele spawns and electric beam traps being in the way, and the conveyor belt means one hit and you fall. Strange shortcut with the secret that isn't too hard to notice. I guess it does let you skip the nasty final section and straight into the boss, but it's just weird that it's there. There aren't any collectibles to get in this level. Stage is thankfully short enough, with the semi-rough difficulty, guess it is to be expected as an electric-themed RM stage. I do enjoy the use of Shatterhand music, good choice there. Okay, so that's where the music was from. I've never actually played Shatterhand. I have heard the name, but I've never actually even seen it in action, so I don't even know what kind of game Shatterhand is. Pretty good mix and match with the Magnet Man tile sets there too, and I like the dark blue background paired with the yellow caution tiling color scheme. Discharge Man himself could do without the whole being shielded for a long time deal. It's a fine boss otherwise, if a little punishing on the damage department and the ear department. Bee-vee-wee-boo, bee-vee-wee-boo. That sound effect is going to be in my nightmares. I really like his sprite work though, very stylishly designed. The aesthetics are definitely the highlight of this stage for me. Flashman 85. If you're going to catch the player off guard, do it in a way that's relatively harmless, e.g. the first fake floors in Mega Man 2, or that makes the player suspicious before the trap is sprung, e.g. the first camouflage metals in Mega Man 9. I'm on board with the surprise spikes at the bottom of a fall because there's enough time to react. But especially when checkpoints are so far apart, Elekins need clearly marked spawn points, and Elecman blocks need a more gradual build-up to becoming brutally sneaky. I'll let the other judges rage against the Yashichi trap, which might have worked if the big shortcut back to that room were more convenient. Taking away all the gotcha moments, there's a lot to like. Coherent theming, energizing music, tile sets that look great together, nice use of sky, and several interesting challenges that combine tired old elements in fresh new ways. I appreciate the need to really examine your surroundings and keep track of multiple hazards at once. Although this level caters too much to one particular playstyle, take it slow, use the Buster except in the toughest situations, it's satisfying to play this the right way. It's almost satisfying to fight the boss. All the individual attacks are good, I especially like the short hops and small projectiles, but the randomness is sudden and brutal, and the fun fizzles due to excessively long and frequent periods of invincibility. I also managed to get the boss stuck jumping endlessly in the corner, so that was an engaging fight. Wonder how he got that to happen. Additional playtesting and polish would do a lot of good. Visually and functionally consistent spikes, unmistakably distinct pits and vertical transitions, especially in a twisty level like this, and more consistent use of ceiling shadows are a few smaller examples of where things could improve. And Ace Spark. Meet the first level that had me swearing out loud. Are you beeping me? I said that out loud. Congrats on that achievement. The level itself is your average electricity-themed stage with an electricity-themed robot master. The design is, at best, just kind of average. Nothing too impressive, nothing too memorable. A nice piece of music, a few portions where you really have to be paying attention, almost overabundance of Sniper Joes. But you did manage to be memorable in one way. There are the dirty moves. Enemies spawning literally out of nowhere? Check. Spikes littering the floor of the screen below you as you drop? Check. A boss who is invincible for most of the battle and said invincibility is turned off by the RNG gods? Check. A boss who also has attacks with an absurd damage output. Check. A bloody trap that sends you back to the start of the level? Check. You even unintentionally snuck in jerk moves, what with pits not being indicated as such, and even invisible spikes in places. See, any one of these things would be bad, but all of them in the same level? Sheesh. So you annoyed me. That annoyance persisted every time I'd go back to this level. I'd clap my hand to my forehead and go, oh yeah, there's that jerkish thing again. This level is a mess, and yes, I even found the skip that goes straight to the boss. Too bad I didn't like the boss, I guess. Overall, I do think the design of this stage is, at the very least, competent. But it does pull some nasty moves, and yeah, the Yasichi thing is just mean. So, I at least like to hope that the shortcut was intentional, so that if you ended up looping around, maybe going back, you'd notice, hey, that pit leads somewhere else, doesn't it? Oh, it's back here, so now I can just continue the stage. So, I'm at least hoping that was an intended nicety after the cheeky haha gotcha. But it could, like I said, just be a dev exit type thing. I don't know for sure. I do, however, agree that, yeah, the Alekans needed a tell. The fact that they always seem to appear over death pits, yeah, that wasn't great. But overall, I did kind of like the stage. It did feel like an overall competent electric-type stage, and I really liked the visuals. The boss, I do agree the boss needed some better telegraphs and more consistency with the shield. Because, yeah, there were times that he just did not want to get rid of that shield. Which, I mean, hey, good on him. If you had a shield that made you invincible, would you drop it? But yeah, for the purposes of gameplay, he really needs to drop it more often. And yes, he hits like a truck. That rider kick especially, that just comes out of nowhere. It's fast, it hits hard, and it's pretty tricky to see that one coming. There's no real telegraph to it. So especially if you're just trying to get under him while he's jumping and he suddenly whips that move out, it can be hard to dodge. But I do think the concept is there for a good Robot Master fight. So, honestly, keep going. I honestly think this is a boss that could be tightened up and made really fun. But with that, that's where we're going to call it for now, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well. And yeah, we're going to go back to the costume shop and we're going to grow up. So, also a bit of behind the scenes. I've heard that apparently some costumes do actually tailor their hitbox. This one obviously didn't. And I'm guessing one of the reasons is he's about one tile high, so gaps that normally you would have to slide through, me IRL could just walk through it if his hitbox was actually what he looks like. So I'm guessing that's the deal there. Weird, but yeah. Me IRL. Cursed in the best ways. Question mark.